During his last conversation with Johnny Carson, Clint Eastwood passed out. Not physically, but mentally. And for 45 seconds, 15 million people watched in quiet as Hollywood's toughest man broke down on national TV, unable to speak or breathe because he was overwhelmed by the truth he had been hiding for 23 years. It was May 22, 1991. Clint was 61 years old. For 30 years, he played tough guys who never backed down, cops who never shook in fear, and heroes who never cried. But on that Wednesday night in Burbank, California, the unknown man finally told the world the secret that had been bothering him since 1968. What made the building fall? It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't being tired. It was something much worse. Something he said about his son. The world didn't know they had a son. Clint hid his son from everyone, Hollywood, the press, and even himself, because he felt bad about it. Not of his son, never of his son, but of himself. After 45 seconds of quiet, Clint finally spoke again, but his voice was broken from years of guilt. "I failed him, Johnny," he said in a low voice. "I failed my son because I was too afraid to be weak." Then something happened that made everything different. For the first time in 30 years as a show, Johnny Carson got up and walked around his desk. He sat next to Clint and said 5 words that made the internet famous before it was even known. "Let's bring him out." The crowd let out a gasp when they saw 23-year-old Scott Eastwood waiting backstage in the wings. He was about to walk onto the Tonight Show stage and face his father, who had kept him from the world. Watch the video to find out why Clint Eastwood hid his son from the public for more than 20 years and what happened when they finally met on live TV. Please click the like button and let me know where you are watching this. Let us look at one of the saddest times in the history of TV. But first, we need to go back to the start of the story. The Tonight Show studio in Burbank was getting ready for what would be the most memorable episode in the show's 30-year run on May 22, 1991. But no one knew it yet. Johnny Carson was in his last season and only a few months away from retiring. He asked Clint Eastwood to do this interview especially for him. But this wasn't a normal advertising event. Clint wasn't there to talk about a new movie. 3 weeks before, someone called Johnny and said something that made the famous host think, "John, I need to be on your show. Before it's too late, I need to say something out loud." Over the years, Johnny had talked to Clint 7 times. It was what Clint didn't say more than what he did that made each show stand out. People knew this man for his silence, his one-word answers, and the way he could say everything with a look. But Johnny always knew that was right. He never pushed. He gave Clint a safe place to be himself, even if that person was shy and quiet. Johnny thought Clint's voice sounded different when he called him need, pain, or something not finished. Johnny's producers told him that this conversation could be important. But not even they knew what Clint was going to say. They only knew Clint had asked for something strange. He asked someone to wait for him backstage while the interview took place. That person would know when the time was right, but he wouldn't say who. The crew noticed that Clint showed up 3 hours early on the day of the taping, which was not like him. He wasn't practicing or making jokes. He was just pacing in his changing room. Pacing. Afterward, the person who did his makeup said she had never seen him so scared. "I remember that his hands were shaking." There was real shaking in Clint Eastwood's hands. As Johnny always does before a show, he went to see guests in their changing rooms and saw Clint looking at a picture. Jonas couldn't see what it was, but he saw Clint put it in his jacket pocket quickly. John asked Clint, "Are you okay?" He looked at him with eyes that held the weight of 23 years and said, "I will be after tonight. I'm going to be." The people in the room didn't know what was going to happen. They had to wait in line. For 6 hours, some with signs that said, "Clint, we love you and stay Dirty Harry forever." They were expecting the usual Clint Eastwood talk, with dry humor, Western stories, and maybe some stories from behind the scenes of his most recent movie. The people there had no idea that they were about to see Clint Eastwood become a dad instead of a celebrity. When Clint Eastwood walked onto the Tonight Show stage in May of that year, he looked just like everyone had expected. Tall, calm, wearing a dark blue blazer and pants, and moving with the slow-moving confidence that people had seen him do for 30 years. The studio crowd gave a resounding cheer. Clint did what he always does. With a smile, she raised one hand and waved. John Carson saw something else, though. Johnny saw that Clint's grip was tighter than normal as he walked up to the desk and shook Johnny's hand. It looked like he was looking to the side of the stage to make sure no one was there because his jaw was locked. "Clint Eastwood, ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, pointing to the guest chair. When Clint sat down and crossed his legs, things seemed fine for a short time. John asked about Clint's Western movie Unforgiven, which he was both directing and acting in. Clint did what he always did. Not long answers. The writing is good. The movie will begin in July. The movie is darker than most Westerns. People in the room laughed at how understated he was. This was old Clint Eastwood, the tough, quiet type that people loved. Johnny wanted to know if he could work with Gene Hackman and Morgan Freeman. Clint talked about how Morgan fell off a horse at practice but got back on without whining. "That is being professional," Clint said. People in the crowd cheered. Johnny asked Clint if he got tired of being a bad guy all the time. "Somebody's got to do it," he said. Deadpanned. More laughs. The chat went 20 minutes smoothly, just like their previous talks. People who knew Clint well saw something deeper than what met the eye. He was funny, but also serious when talking about his work, and always humble about his accomplishments. His hands weren't at ease. His watch kept moving, and every few minutes he would look toward the stage wings. Johnny, who was TV's best interviewer because of his instincts, could tell that Clint was carrying a lot. He not only asked but also pushed. If Clint stopped for a longer time than normal, he let the silences breathe. He let Clint go where he needed to go without getting in the way. Then, after about 25 minutes, Johnny asked a question that seemed like it was a simple one. "Clint, you've played a lot of famous people. The man without a name, also known as Dirty Harry, is one of these guys who stand alone and face everything head-on. Is there any of that that's really you, or is it all just stage?" Clint's face changed. People in the room could see it. He looked at his hands. It got quieter in the room. Some people could feel something changing. And then Clint Eastwood did something he had never done in public in 30 years. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone else in public?" he asked Johnny Carson. "It's about my kid." People in the theater let out gasps because they didn't know Clint Eastwood had a son. Johnny Carson kept his cool like a pro, but his eyes got a little bigger. "Sure thing, Clint. Say what you need to say." Clint took a big breath in. "I had a boy in 1968. His name is Scott. He's 23 years old now, and most people in the doesn't know he's there." The studio crowd let out audible gasps. Johnny even looked truly shocked. "Why didn't anyone know?" Johnny asked in a soft way. The reason Clint gave was, "Because I was protecting him." His voice was steady but strained. "I wasn't married to his mother. It was a tricky position. I believed that he could live a normal life if I kept him out of the press. I told myself that for 23 years. Clint stopped and put his hand on the chair. "Johnny, that's not all the truth. I came here too. I'm going to tell the truth tonight." There was no sound in the studio at all. 15 million people in the United States leaned closer to their TVs. Clint went on, his voice breaking, "When Scott was born, I was told he had cerebral palsy by the doctors. They told him he might never be able to walk without help, live on his own, or do anything without help his whole life." His eyes were shiny. "I was scared too." Johnny put his hand out. "What are you scared of?" "Of being weak." Clint's voice cracked. "I had made a living." They played men who were never scared, weak, or in need of help. They were cowboys who fought criminals and cops who never gave up. After that, I had a son who needed me to be strong in a different way. He needed me to be open with him, to ask for help, and to say I wasn't sure what to do. Clint's eyes were filled with tears. The crowd was stunned and silent. This was the man on national TV who had no name and was crying. As for Johnny, I let him down. I hid him because I felt bad about it. Not of Scott. Never of Scott. I felt bad about myself. I felt bad that I wasn't the tough guy everyone thought I was. Then it took place. Clint Eastwood passed out. That is, not physically, but mentally. He put his head down in his hands. There was a 45-second shaking in his shoulders. He was unable to talk. Not able to see. Almost couldn't breathe. No one in the crowd moved. No one coughed. No one spoke quietly. They just saw Hollywood's strong person fall apart. He was able to let go of 23 years of guilt because Johnny gave him room. The filmer didn't stop. It was important for people to see this, not because it was shocking, but because it was real. Clint raised his head after 45 seconds. He had tears on his face. But Johnny Scott got his film degree from UCLA last week. That doctor was wrong. He showed everyone they were wrong, and I realized I had wasted 23 years hiding the best thing that happened to me. Clint took a look at the video. I brought him here tonight. He is behind the scenes, and I need to let him know I'm say sorry to everyone. I need to tell everyone that hiding my son Scott was a cowardly move.